Hi there. I'm going to talk you through how to construct the guidelines for a cylinder that's lying on its side. And I've done a lot of measuring already. I'm surprised at how much measurement this took, considering that the cup itself is really pretty simple. It is a cup that gets narrower at the bottom, so that does mean that I have to check each ellipse separately. I can't just assume that they're all going to be the same width. So that took a little bit longer. But the fact that it's also a little bit foreshortened means that, you know, sometimes you have to double check your measurements. I think I may have made mine even a little bit too long still, but I'll just kind of go with it to move on with the demo here. So what I did first of all was establish the basic direction of the object. So you can draw a real light guideline through the middle there. I'm going to darken things as I talk you through them so that you can see the drawing develop. And then what was my starting point was this mouth ellipse. So I took some measurements of the height and the width, and I penciled in kind of that basic ellipse first. So let's go ahead and darken that in. And the crosshairs are kind of important too. And then I was using that as my unit of measurement so that I could take some of the other measurements. So I tried to figure out the overall height to width, and I came up with this point. Again, I think I ended up stretching it out a little bit. I might be able to shorten it as we go a tiny bit, but I think this is a little longer than it probably should be, which means all of this has to move over a little bit further. So I kept most of these ellipses pretty flexible as I was doing my initial measurements so that there was room to kind of correct things as I went. The other thing I was noticing is I have this dark band around the center of the glass that I needed to get in the right place. So I used some, so for example, first I was trying to do this next ellipse. I was trying to notice how spaced out these midges are, or these different ellipses, and it turns out that it's, approximate thirds from the edge of the mouth of the glass down to the base of the glass. So I just used a ruler, and again, I'm going to need to move these a little bit if I shorten the whole glass, but it means that I came up with some dividing lines about thirds here, and that's where the arc is going to happen. Then I also needed to think about how the ellipses at the visible end of the glass are going to be a little bit flatter. And again, it's not a huge glass, so there's not going to be a super noticeable change in the ratios, but I do want this one to appear a little bit rounder than the one that's at the mouth. So I was consciously measuring and remeasuring those ellipses to make sure that they weren't getting flatter as they got toward the end that we can't see as well. Now this second ellipse, there are a lot of things that we can see. Luckily this glass is mostly transparent with the exception of this band through the middle. So I was relying a lot on the shapes that I was seeing intersect here. So I was noticing that this darker kind of almond shaped wedge that we see through here comes about halfway. I kind of measured across and it was approximately halfway, so I was going to use that as one of my guidelines. I also put the center lines in here so I knew where the ellipse had to fit. I had these 4 landmarks that I was using to help check my symmetry of that ellipse, and so we can kind of darken that in a little bit. This part, because we're looking through the glass, I won't darken it quite as much there, but here again we're seeing the front edge of the glass, so we can draw that as a solid line. And then we're going to shift down. I think before I go too far, I'm going to draw this edge of the glass to make sure that all of my ellipses fit within the walls of the glass. And remember, if you turn it upright, it might help you double check that these lines are perpendicular to that long axis line that runs down the middle. And then if we do this right, we should be able to, that straight line should go right through the midpoint of all of our other ellipses. So here's our base ellipse. Let's darken that in a little bit. And the part that we can't see, I still want you to draw in so that we can check the proportions of the ellipse. So this is where it's touching the, you know, if it were sitting upright where it would be touching the table, that's the far end ellipse. And then we're going to add in these other ellipses that are sort of the brown label that's on it. And this part we can't see right here completely. Okay. Now, yeah, I think I'm going to darken some things in a little bit just to make it a little bit more clear how we're viewing this. So if you wanted to do just a tiny bit of you know, hatching, that would be an option. I don't want you to do any sort of full shading and smearing. Never smear graphite, even though your high school teacher may have showed you that bad technique. I think smudging tends to make graphite look pretty sloppy. So in my class, I'd rather you not use your fingers to smear around the graphite. We will blend charcoal a lot, but I think graphite looks better if it's just left as hatch marks or left a little bit more clear. And then you could do a little bit of hatching on this side too. Now this, because it's on the inside of the glass, I'm going to use a lighter pressure so that I don't confuse things too much, but I do want to show that it's also part of that darker brown color that's wrapping around the glass. And it's still a little bit hard to read this, so I think I'm going to add that second ellipse that defines the thickness of the plexiglass. This is where I really have to pay a lot of attention, where the two halves of the ellipse meet so that it doesn't become pointy there. It's really easy to just think of the ellipse as two halves instead of a continuous curve there. So anyway, you'll kind of refine this a little bit more as you go. Get it back in the right orientation there. So if it's still a little bit confusing to read, you might go in and just kind of lighten the lines that are popping out too bright. But I do want to still see those construction lines so that I know your ellipses are correct. And we can come back in with a little bit softer pencil. That fine tip pencil just isn't giving me the darks that I need for the video here. So I'll darken this curve as well. Alright, again, these ebony pencils are so darn smudgy. It's really hard to keep your drawing clean when you use them. Okay, so there is this would be our number 4 position on the cylinder drawings, the object drawn on its side.